Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can actually choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many people's Kickstarters who have been on this show. Obviously, a few weeks ago, Sam Quinton was on, and he actually showed what it actually looks like and what Mixum can do. And so that's a really good episode to look at. About 30 minutes in, we're going through it. Really cool stuff. And right now, they actually offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience around the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now, listeners of my show can actually drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on your first order. And I know, and I'm sure you're going to attest to it, that every percentage point discount matters, whether you reach $1,000 over your goal or you just met your goal. A discount of any type can be super efficient. So that is Mixam.com. Type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive 5% off of your very first order. And I have with me comic creator Honor Vincent. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very excited to be here on the internet.
Yes. The internet is working because I almost just had a heart attack when my internet was down for 7 minutes. And imagine it was down for 8. That's all I'm going to say, and you all can imagine it. But jokes aside, it's actually super interesting because you sort of found me in a Facebook group, and then I also shared New Rat City, which is your Kickstarter, in my private Facebook group, and a bunch of people backed it. It was obviously shared on Twitter out there. And so a bunch of people have already backed your project. I know you're fully funded. But for those who haven't, what is New Rat City about? Because some people who are going to see this and hear this, because Facebook algorithms are tricky at this point of how things reach, what is the comic about? Because it's a very interesting premise.
Well, thanks. Yeah, so New Rat City is a 4-issue miniseries about my proposed end of New York City. It is a world where rats and roaches and pigeons and all of the other sort of pests that we have here are organizing, they're swarming, they're starting to spell words out, and they're starting to tear the city apart from the inside. And the kind of lens that we see this story through is a pest controller who is in her early 20s. She's working the family business, kind of learning the ropes at the same time that all of this stuff is going on. And she's trying to figure out why there's blue slime everywhere following the rats, and also kind of the twin mysteries of that, and why her mother disappeared a year prior. So she's got a lot to do and a lot going on around her work, as do we all. It's, kind of coming from, my dad was an exterminator when I was a kid. So that's like a big inspiration for the book and how I kind of found that angle into it. It also comes from my fear of flooding and my interest in it, kind of having been here through Sandy and Irene a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and so obviously let's dive a little bit deeper into it because the year is 2083, so it's a little bit in the future. It's not out of the question that some people who might be hearing this will live to see 2083. And the way humanity is going, we're going to reach immortality sooner rather than later. I mean, life on Mars is going to be fun. That's all I'm going to say. If Elon Musk has anything to do with that. But it also goes a little bit deeper where a lot of people have left New York City because a bunch of it is underwater. I think northern Manhattan and parts of Staten Island and parts of the Bronx are sort of okay, and they're sort of their own little enclaves, for lack of a better word. And a bunch of people have left. And I don't think the world is flooded. I just think that it's New York City and your story is. And also, for whatever reason, and the back of the book gives a little bit away on what you sent me with it's a nice touch on the back of the book, what's going on. I don't want to ruin it just yet, what's on the back of the book. but it's this idea that they can't kill these creatures and these pests. And so what was that like? Because when I call an exterminator and there's a bee's nest in my house, no offense to the bees, but they're going and they're dying. You know, it's not a compromise. I'm sorry, it's just not. The exterminator's job is not just to kill the bee, it's to remove them and prevent them from coming back in.
Right.
So what was this like building this up? Because it's so interesting when we think of pest control. You know, I think of the idea of saying, hey, let's get this rodent or thing out, or let's prevent it from ever coming back in, or both.
Right. And that is totally how we think of it now. Like, you would be pretty mad if an exterminator came into your house and you had rats and he knocked on the wall.
The only thing that you want to do is that with bats, you know, exterminators and people who eliminate bats, what they do is that they put out netting, and it's almost like reverse netting, with the idea that the bat can fly out of the netting, but it can't fly back in.
Right.
And because nobody wants to kill a bat, because in reality, bats are pretty good actually for the environment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, like spiders too. So it kind of came from me thinking about things like that, right? Like, what's the line between an animal that we don't like and don't want around us and will kill, and an animal that we do like and do want around us, or even that we will spare? I think about that stuff a lot. I think the sort of humane laws that are in the book, that comes from a sort of thought experiment of, we are getting more aware of like how we treat animals, how animals experience pain, all of these other things that we weren't really thinking about, you know, even 50 years ago. And what might happen in a world where we are still living like cheek to jowl with all of these animals, but there are bigger laws, like worldwide laws perhaps, that forbid humans from hurting other creatures. And kind of, where's the most tension going to be with a law like that? Probably in a place like New York City, where if you suddenly have a lot of abandoned buildings, rats fill it in. If you've got a lot of flooding and stuff, there's going to be a lot more bugs in the city. And, you know, for the people who are holding on, the only people keeping the city habitable for them are the pest controllers. Like, that's your line of defense. They're almost like firefighters in this world in terms of importance. Like, you can't live without them here.
And we're going to dive into the entire ethical question of all this stuff. And rats are fascinating creatures. One of the greatest countries that is inhabitable and will become more inhabitable in the next 20 years is due to rats, and that's Vietnam. It's super interesting because rats actually can detect all the mines that the Vietnamese and the United States detected, and they don't actually trigger out those mines, and they're more effective than dogs. And they actually have a sharper smell than dogs do, rats. So it sounds like 12 millionths, and dogs I think are at 6. So a rat is 2 to 5 times more effective than a dog in smelling, where a dog, it will take an entire day to clear a field. A rat can clear a field in an hour.
It's pretty great. I saw it. It's like a kangaroo rat, right, that does that. And I think they gave it like a little medal. Like, there's one in particular who's cleared a lot. I can't remember what its name is, but they gave him a little medal. It was so cute.
There is a rat that has a medal, and it's a crazy story, and it's actually retired the rat. It's an insane story. It's an official post, and then it's one of the funniest things I've ever read. I just wrote a review on all of this for my website, but anyway, I digress. So we're going to talk about the ethical question because I find this so interesting. But even to talk about the world, because I sort of took my hat a little bit off, but obviously New York City is extremely iconic, where I think everybody in the world has a sense of what New York City is, whether that's due to 9/11, whether that's due to Sandy, whether that's due just to the fact that the Statue of Liberty's there, just due to the fact of Pokemon. Yes, Pokemon, New York City. Black and White was based off of New York City and all that stuff. I kid you not. I'm from Yorktown originally. White Plains was in that game. New York City was in that game. Jersey City was in that game. If you look at it,
I
the
didn't
center
play. I
of
know it's not
Unova is
it's the
Central
first
Park.
10. Cool. It's not in like the top 20 list of the things I think about when I think about New York City, but I will have to check that out.
No. But it's a big issue and it's a big deal when it was actually done that way. But all jokes aside, what was it like really creating this world and actually flooding New York City and, putting it underwater and transforming it? Because when I thought of your book, and obviously, I read it and then I read the description, I thought of DMV that Brian Wood did, where New York becomes a demilitarized zone. And now you're actually looking at iconic components and what's being patrolled and where people live and understanding how all this works now when you have things that don't exist anymore in that area. And then also, how is it even governed and all sorts of stuff, and really fleshing out that world, because the environment is just as important as the characters in this story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I'm like a third generation New Yorker. Like I'm a barnacle, like we're here for good. So it's very like deep in my bones, my love for the city, and also I'm worried about it. I've been worried about it like really since that hurricane.
There are problems with New York City, clearly, as far as water, because you're on an island.
Right, it's a real existential threat, and if you look at the coastline of New York City over time, it's been built out so far that we have people living in places that are gonna flood. So basically, like the core of the setting here comes from like my deepest fears realized, which is New York floods so badly that people can't live here anymore. And I think living here through COVID actually cemented all of this for me. Like it kind of made the setting a little bit clearer, because, I was in an apartment for a year and a half, and like everything that made the city is gone. You don't have Broadway, you don't have, people around, you don't have the restaurants, you don't have public transportation, like all of those things that make it so special went away for a little while. So that really, like, oddly, unfortunately helped, I think, with the vibe here. And then I looked in terms of like logistics, I looked at flood maps and I looked at elevation maps and tried to figure out like, okay, what will we do? Like, how far will we go before we kind of throw in the towel on New York? Like, I'm thinking if lower Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens keep flooding and people can't live there reliably, that's probably it. So in the book, there's a flood wall at 59th Street. Very graffitied. I recently rewatched Escape from New York. There's like a little bit of that in there, but it's really more of an abandoned kind of like ghost town vibe I was going for. It is a tourist trap in this world too. So it's like there's a tour company called New Atlantis Tours that does glass bottom boat tours of the city for people from, fancy places like Kansas City that don't flood and don't have natural disasters. So the kind of like the world that this New York City is in is one where people have shifted to these new urban centers in the middle of the country. Going to space is like no big deal. It's what a lot of the young people do because it's where the money is. So people are really kind of abandoning the coasts, abandoning, what the world looks like now. And in a lot of places, people are doing pretty well. But here it's, you think of kind of the old factory towns, like on the East Coast of the US, in the Carolinas, especially like the Rust Belt. That's kind of, it's that on a New York City scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also even just taking that and then transforming it, because you need to have certain things, because you can't transform it too far out of proportion. And I'm going to use a tattoo analogy where, I love new school tattoos. I love new school art style. Steph Wilson, who is very much a new school artist, he might disagree with that statement, and that's fine, but it's definitely new school. And the saying is with new school is that in order to do new school, you need to know the rules of traditional tattooing, and then you need to know the rules to break the rules. And so with transforming a place like New York City, that's such an iconic thing that you need to know the rules in New York City in order to break them. And it's very important that I think people don't understand when you take something like New York City And Brian Wood with DMV does a great example of that because, and it's perfect and it's comparable because you're taking what is New York City and then 90, not 90, more like probably like 70% of it is messed up and underwater. I think it's a safe assumption in your book.
Yeah.
If not more, I mean, it could be 80 technically. I don't know how big we would calculate New York City as far as exactly what's underwater, but I think the idea is made. I think my point's made. But what is that like to say, hey, look, how do I maintain the city and still keep in New York? Because it's great that you tell your readers, but there needs to be some iconic stuff out there as well.
Right. And there are definitely some big landmarks that I use. So there's the Museum of Natural History, which is abandoned. The idea is that all of the really valuable stuff was like yanked out a long time ago. So there's only like a couple of the dioramas left that, spoiler alert, are, kind of infested themselves. Central Park has been turned into a big rat holding pen. So because the exterminators can't kill things in this world, they have to herd all the rats somewhere. So there are kind of what you were talking about with the bats. There are these like tunnels leading to Central Park. It's this huge walled up complex, and that's where all of the rats are shunted. So they're, shunted with sound cannons and pheromone sprays into the Central Park pound. There's, Columbus Circle. So that's still there. That's kind of like the bottom edge of the city. And then the other big one, which is in my old neighborhood, is the United Palace Theater. So, that's where the exterminators have like their meeting. So it's this big, gorgeous, turn of the century wonder theater that was built, to be very elaborate and fancy. And now it's where the exterminators meet and hang out. And so what I was thinking about too is like a city like New York, any old place. And I know New York's not old in like an absolute sense in terms of places like Rome or London, but we're kind of like little hermit crabs in a way. Like when you live in a city, like you're always like living in the shells of what things used to be. And I wanted that feeling to really be there too. Like people are kind of using these once glorious buildings and places as, these horrible reasons, just so they can like keep living in this place that isn't what it is anymore or what it was.
And then to even go further into this, sort of throw into the main character, and it's Felicia Shepard, and obviously just a little bit of a spoiler alert here. I'm gonna ruin some stuff here. She's sort of thrown into the family business. So she's thrown into the family business because her dad's attacked by rats, loses a leg. And then she's thrown in, and she can't kill anything. And then she's also dealing with the idea that her mom left all of a sudden before all of this happened with her dad. And now she's trying to help the last few inhabitants of New York City sort of survive and stay there and not leave, because all those people have personal reasons of staying there. And I guess, the government has said you could leave or you can't, or they're not going to force anybody to do anything. And what is that like really creating her? Because she's got a lot of stuff going on where she's learning the trade and she's learning how to, deal with these rats and deal with these creatures and see stuff starting to happen and see other creatures, and knowing that, she can't just kill them, even though, she goes to somebody and she's like, I won't tell if you kill them. And it's this entire idea that that's sort of what's going on with her. And there's a lot of moving parts that are sort of happening because she's sort of thrown into a problem, and then, politically land shift happens where killing is now sort of being permitted out of nowhere all of a sudden. Spoiler alert, but I don't think it's too much of a big one, where they go from a no kill to a kill as well. And so what was it really like creating her? Because it raises a lot of questions of what's going on.
Yeah. So with her, I wanted to have somebody so in this world, like you said, it's 2083. So people who are being, born now, maybe growing up in a world that didn't have these laws, that had normalcy, are now older in this world. So they don't have as much of a problem with like killing a rat as Felicia does, because she grew up with these laws. Like they were always there for her. So that's one of her main inner conflicts throughout the series is, yeah. So there's an emergency order that the mayor, who's kind of the, the Lord here, issues an emergency order that lifts the no-kill thing because there are huge swarms of rats kind of running amok through the city all of a sudden. They're trying to figure out what's going on, but they need to get it under control first. So she allows the exterminators a 2-week period to exterminate things. And all of the older ones are like, okay, great. Yep. We know, that's fine. Felicia's that really upsets her. So that's kind of where this conversation is. Yeah.
And to even go further into that, because obviously, there's this position that she has where she has obviously a personal vendetta to some degree against the rats because they took her dad's leg. But at the same time, she grew up with all of these laws, and it's not just the rats that they can kill. And there's a massive sort of conflict within her. And it really raises questions on ethical killing and killing creatures and killing things because they're an inconvenience versus safety. And it really is a much deeper question of, humans are in a weird position because technically we are not in the food chain the same way a hawk is in a food chain and in its own, ecosystem, because we are in everybody's food chain to some degree. Technically, I guess a cow is beneath us if we're going to really be honest about this conversation. But now it gets into all those deep philosophical questions. And I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know how far you intended to go into this, but it raises a lot of interesting questions, not to mention that if there's all these rats and while they're getting smarter to some degree as well, and they're getting a lot more vicious and they're becoming more deadly, it's also an issue now. Well, what are these creatures and what are they attempting to do? And what happens next in New York City? And can New York City be reconquered, for lack of a better word, and all that type of stuff that's going on? So what is it like to really write this? Because there's a lot of stuff being asked here. And this is like a 9-hour debate question, by the way. I'm not going to pretend here. Like the short answer is what I'm looking for. But I think it's really important to actually talk about this with your Kickstarter, because this is a very interesting question to ask.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And I'm really glad that you are picking up on all this stuff from issue 1, because I wanted to get it in there and seed all of those questions and hopefully answer them to satisfaction by number 4. So one of my favorite recent books, I am very interested in ecology and in how we treat and think about animals with respect to us. And coming from a lot of different places, but one of my favorite science writers is Elizabeth Kolbert. She thinks a lot about the effect that humans have on the environment. So she wrote this book, I think a year or 2 ago, called Under a White Sky. And it is about all of how we do too much, to try to mitigate the damage that we've done to the environment. So, there's one section of the book that's about this section of river in, I think it's off of Lake Michigan, that they've actually reversed the flow of the river because they introduced a fish species that wasn't supposed to be there, that was eating everything. And it's just this huge, ridiculous machine of mistakes that people have, made, where I think the core of her thesis of the book is if we simply stepped back for a year, things would probably sort themselves out. But instead, and I think this is really prevalent in Louisiana.
It's also very interesting, because what I also think humans don't understand is that we have made a bunch of species go extinct, but every day species go extinct anyway that we haven't discovered out in the rainforest. And maybe not every day, but every year, naturally a rare breed of insects is going to die, and then a new insect type is going to come up in the rainforest just by nature and just by positioning. So a species going extinct isn't necessarily a bad thing. it's not in the scheme of things, because things come and go. It's how evolution persists. At some point,
scale of it, right? It's the speed is the thing that makes it bad. Yeah,
it's different when you hunt something to extinction, versus the idea that certain creatures have gone extinct, well, because they couldn't adapt fast enough. So I guarantee you this year there's probably at least 100 species that went extinct. Now they might be a rare.
They released a list recently. I think it was like 60 something, like just this year alone.
The species I'm talking about are not on that list.
Things we've never heard of.
Things we've never heard of, never seen, because, well, maybe there was 10 of them and then that was it. Mm-hmm. And they were an adaptation of something else, because two insects breeded by accident, produced an offspring set, and then that thing lasted 5 years. It's a new species to some degree. But the idea is that I guess the point I'm making is that, going off of that thesis, is that, when we try to interfere with all of that and say, oh my God, we discovered a new species, we have to prevent it, it's now endangered, at a certain point, when we start playing God, it gets tricky.
Oh yeah, I think that's a fair statement. There's another example in this book that I love, I can't remember the name of it, but it is this fish that only lives in this one cave in New Mexico, in the desert, because there's this weird little pool of water in this cave, and there's 100 of them left. And because it's so sensitive and they only live in this one place, they're extremely threatened, because, if anything happens to that cave, that's it for those fish. So what these scientists have done is really amazing. They've built this fake cave about 10 miles away in the desert, and they carry some of the fish there in buckets very carefully to settle them in the cave, so that there are now they have a backup drive of these fish now. But then you think, kind of what you're saying, think about all the resources that went into protecting that one little fish. Where could that have gone? And I think this is kind of what she talks about a bit in her book, is we act kind of like there aren't consequences in a lot of ways. And then when it gets to the point where something's going to go extinct, or, there's flooding constantly, we'll do so much to prevent that last 1% of terrible things from happening. But we won't do anything until it gets to that emergency point. And I think that's such an interesting piece of human psychology. So that's the deeper idea that I was working on in this book too.
It's a very interesting component, and I know a lot about animal species and all sorts of stuff, and there's also a lot of misinformation about a bunch of this stuff out there. And it is a very complicated topic. What we influence, what we don't influence, and all that stuff. And it's above my pay grade by far. And I'm not an expert on any of it. I just read a lot on it. I know a bunch about it. I know a bunch about what governments do. And look, population, even with herds, is complicated. You look at places like Africa, there has to be sometimes killings of herds, and there has been, because they are way too populated. In Yellowstone is a great example, where wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, and that's a very good thing, because it cut down on the deer's population, where it's a big issue. And even we're in Westchester County, where I'm from, they introduced wolves back in, which helped the deer population. And it prevented a lot of deers from dying, because a bunch of them were killed. And I know it sounds more but what I just described. But it's really actually more humane, versus a bunch of deer eating every little flower you own, and then, half of them die because there's not enough food. Versus
and everything else that dies because there's no food, right?
Versus a wolf killing 30%, curtailing the population, and the population slowly growing with the wolf population or a coyote population. It's so interesting. And then the final thing that's so interesting about your book as well, and we're going to get into inside baseball, which is my favorite side, which is more the business side of things. Because I'm not trying to ruin things, is that there's some blue stuff coming out of these rats, and there's some serious intelligence going on. And I don't know what we call this. We could call it, learned behavior, I guess. We could call it organized, crime. That's a really bad joke right there. Rats in prison. I'm just saying. I've been waiting to use that joke. When we were scheduling this interview, it came to me right off the top of my head. Or organized rats here. But hey.
Oh no, you froze. I'm gonna ask.
There are rats in prison too. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. I was gonna ask what I don't know that I get the context, or if you want to explain it or not.
A rat in prison is a snitch.
Oh, never mind. I get it. I'm just really slow today. Duh. Okay, I got it.
Cool. The joke is that it looks more like us in prison, but that's not. It's a really bad joke. I watch a lot of prison stuff, in which one of my favorite shows is Oz from like the '90s on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of like HBO's like original like drama series. It's great. It has so many people in it. J.K. Simmons is in it. Christopher Melanini was in it, and so many people are in that. Ernie Hudson was in that. I mean, legitimately that show launched
when it was on. Yeah, but I never watched it. My parents watched that when it was like on, like when each episode was airing, whenever that was. But I never
it's amazing. But I'm rewatching it right now. It's so good. It's so good. It stands the test of time. It's so relevant. It's like legitimately you could put that in today's age with legitimately just like a touch up on the writing and you're good to go. You could shoot it off right now. Oh, it's brilliant. But what is going on with some of the blue stuff that you want to tell us? Because that's the other thing that's going on too, is that these rats and these other creatures, and it's not just the rats at this point, is shooting out blue goo and blue slime and blue stuff possibly when killed and leaving it behind. And there's something bigger that's going on behind the scene where obviously there's a kill order has been lifted for a reason. Mm-hmm. So what's going on exactly with all this?
So I have to be careful because I can't say too much or I'll give the whole game away. But there is indeed blue goo slime that is on the rats and the pigeons and, the roaches and all these other animals. There's also some newly evolved animals in the book. So we are calling them in the script slugfish. One of the characters in the book is a biologist. There are sort of like 3 industries in New York at this point. So there's tourism, pest control, and biology. Because there are so many animals here, they're starting to evolve into new things. So we don't know yet at the end of issue 1 what the slime is. We will find out. I can say it is definitely related to the swarming behavior and the
related to a catfish. I think we could
cooperation. Say. Huh? It's similar to a catfish, but
it kind of came out of a catfish, sort of.
It looks like a catfish and a slug.
Fishy animal, eh?
Yep. Wamp wamp. I did get that one at least. Yes, so it's that thing kind of lives in puddles, and that's also so this stuff is seen on most of the animals in the city for a good reason. And yes, it is definitely related to how organized they are all of a sudden. Everything comes together. It all gets wrapped up. But I can't say too much. I'm like holding myself back so much because there's a reason why
I'm asking what I'm asking, because obviously there's a lot of stuff, and we dug a little bit and dove a little bit into it, and I spoke some elements of it, but I left certain things ambiguous and very vague for a reason. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Obviously, this no-kill position is definitely higher than just New York City at this point, which is fascinating as well. And that's sort of on the back. I want to dive into inside baseball, because one of the things about your Kickstarter, and it's a little confusing, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain it, is that this is sort of, I think, issues 1 and 2 together as part 1. And that it's a double format type book. it's a little bit bigger that's being offered versus the idea of, doing it as issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, issue 4. And so it's really part 1 that's coming out, but it's sort of issues 1 and 2. And so what's the rationale and reason behind this? Because this is a different format. Most comics, and it's changing right now in comics actually extensively, where a lot of companies are moving to more one-shots, where they're doing 66 pagers in more of a square-bound book, or they're doing a 72-page one-shot. I'm a big Zenescope fan, and they do 72-page one-shots. And then you have DC and Marvel that are still doing situation going on in comics right now. But what prompted you to do this format? Because it is sort of a double feature, but it's not 2 separate books.
Right. So there's like a practical reason, and then I think an experimental reason maybe. The experimental reason is I am more likely to pick up a comic if there's a number 1 and a number 2 or more. Like I'm more likely to pick up 2 floppies than 1 because I read them pretty fast and like I want to keep going. So that came from me, enjoying kind of having a little bit more to dig into at first, and thinking it's a mini series, so it splits easily into 2 campaigns, into 2 parts. I love Kickstarter in terms of finding an audience, being able to talk to people, like, being able to kind of tell the story in long form. But I also do struggle a bit, which is like why I'm excited to do this show with like the self-promotion and like constantly running them. So another thing was like, I didn't want to have to do 4 of these.
So to talk about this, is this meaning that, just for clarification, that you're going to only have to run another campaign after this to finish off this?
Right. So I'm going to do 1 more for New York City with issues 3 and 4 together as part 2. So you'll be able to do part 1, part 2. They'll each be like 48-ish pages of story plus extras. So it'll be like a 66-pager total for each.
And the reason why I asked this is because obviously I'm going to throw another thing at you, and I'm sure we're going to sort of circle back to the first question, is that I don't know how many Kickstarters you've done prior to this and how many comics you have done. I haven't done my homework extensively. Is this your first one, or is this like your 5th one?
This is my 2nd one. So I've produced, this will be, before I started New Red City, I had written and produced 3 issues of Andraste, which is a historical fantasy series. And we did a Kickstarter for a trade of those first 3 issues. So I had done this once before, but only once.
And so the reason why I ask all this is that obviously what's going on right now with Kickstarter and all that is, and I'm sure you know this, that it is hard to maintain an art team together. It is hard to find an artist. It's hard to write projects. It's hard to maintain an audience. And so that, how did that factor into that? Because that's also a practical, structural reason with doing, mini-series are big right now in comics, doing a 4-parter for something. And I picked up, 7-issue books, for instance, or 6-issue books where there's 6 issues and then they're done, or they're doing a 3-parter or a 4-parter, because, maintaining a team is difficult. And also things happen and everybody on the indies is getting signed. In comics right now, a lot of people are being pulled out of Kickstarter to do work on, bigger Kickstarters, for instance, on a Lady Death Kickstarter, or, Kickstarters like a Nocturna or a Berserk Kickstarter, or they're being pulled out by Boom, or somebody sees their work and they're like, hey, do you want to do a series with me? And not to be mean about this, but if somebody's offering an artist, a page rate of $400 a page.
Oh yeah, I can't compete with that.
And it's a big problem. I mean, I had Sean Keenan on, and he got somebody.
I saw that. He's great.
He's great, but his first book with XTC Monsters was that his first artist got pulled big out of, to DC and Marvel and to the big guys. And how do you say no to that position?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of can't like, and it's like economics, right? It's just they're gonna make the decision that works for them, and you can't really like fault them for that. But that is also so the artist I'm working with on New Rat City is George Quadros, who's fantastic. He's really like very thoughtful, really interesting layout work, like really fast. And I had worked with him because on my last book, we had a shakeup with the art team kind of towards the end of issue 3, and we needed to finish the issue. And I needed, somebody to kind of like come in kind of short term and finish out the issue. That's why I'm trying to get 1 through 4 done, like, early next year. The thing that's hard about that, I think, for a lot of people is that's expensive. Like if you're I pay everyone a page rate. So like, I don't make money on this for a long time. That's fine. Like I pay my art team. I believe in doing that. Like they could go and work on their own books if they wanted to. Not everyone's able to do that, and that's totally understandable, but that's how I'm working on this. And yeah, I think the like kind of coming back to getting picked up and, I think people do Kickstarters for many different reasons. I think most of us do them to like find a real audience who really cares about the book because it's the best place to do that. Like crowdfunding in general, I think like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever it is. I think, yeah, it's also a great portfolio. It's proving that you can produce a book, that you can do it on time, that you're professional. So like New Rat City, I'll give you the scoop. Another reason that we're doing issue, part 1 and part 2, this is the only time they'll be printed that way. Scout Comics is going to put out the series next year in single issues. So like probably next fall it'll be. It's really exciting. Like it's just all my dreams came true, but it's like the reason that happened is because I'd already done Andraste and proved I can produce a book and be on time and like all of that good stuff.
So it's actually very interesting what's going on with indie, and I am what is known as a contrary investor, and my internet's acting up, so everybody's gonna have to deal with that.
Wait, a what investor? I missed that word, sorry.
I am a contrary investor. Okay. By definition, when people run away from an investment, I tend to run into it. And then when people are going all the way in, I tend to get out of it. And what I find to be fascinating, and I'm very pessimistic, which means I'm always right eventually. But all these companies like Second Sight Publishing and a bunch of others are optioning every indie book, and Scout is doing the same thing. And I'm curious how you think of this, because this is how I'm viewing it, is that there's so many really good indie projects right now coming out that I think all these comic companies need to take a shotgun approach to saying what's going to be the big hit. And that doesn't mean that certain books aren't good, because there's I think there's 260 projects. There are some of the most amazing projects every single month on Kickstarter and comics right now. But I have a feeling places like Scout and a variety of other places have no idea what's actually going to be a hit and what's going to resonate. It's the same problem that Netflix is having. It's the same problem that WWE is having. It's the same problem Disney's having, is that they don't know what is going to hit and what isn't. They have an idea what's going to, but Netflix has a $20 billion budget. Scout does something very interesting where Scout says, hey, we don't want to pay for your art team. We don't have a problem you kickstarting the book, but we'll cover the printing and help with distribution, because it limits their liability and their risk. And it's actually a very smart business practice.
Oh, yeah.
In a lot of ways. But it's getting very interesting, because I think that's what comics and indie comics are going through right now, is they're going through a problem. It just happened. That's so weird. Apparently the internet is not cooperating today.
They don't want the people to hear you.
This is Scout taking me out, clearly.
No, we love Scout.
But I'm curious how you think about that, because it's a very interesting time with indie right now, and Scout's not the only ones who are doing that, where, and I don't think it's a secret, it's the idea that I think that all these companies have no idea what is going to be the next big breakout. You know, The Walking Dead with Image in 2003 and really starting in 2005 was the breakout. Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia was breakout mangas and animes. And now I think we're in a time where there's so much good content. It is so complicated to say what's going to be the home run that's going to define a generation. And I think all these indie, publishers are saying, hey, how do we figure this out? And I'm curious how you think of it, because I know so many projects that Scout has, said, hey, we're going to print this. And Behemoth is getting in the game, and a variety of others. And everybody I know is getting signed. And it's a crazy time because, but it alarms me as well, because I'm like, what's going to be like this superstar? Because literally 3 years ago, there was probably about 80% less of this out there. And it's just like, I feel oversaturated tremendously.
It's too much.
When there's over 260 projects in comics on Kickstarter, that's a lot.
No, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
I think
not to put you on the spot and ruin your deal. Not to put you on the spot.
You won't, because I'm going to sing Scout's praises right now for good reason, because I wouldn't have signed with them if I didn't believe in what they were doing. And I think, so I'm sure there are companies like that are doing like what you're calling a shotgun approach. I don't think Scout is one of them from what I've seen and heard so far. They've been really awesome. They understand, I think, the landscape of crowdfunding really well, because they do it themselves. Their co-publishers are really successful with crowdfunding their own books. Stake and White Ash, they're great books. They've built up communities. They know how to do that work. And I think that's what drew me to them in particular, is they understand building communities around their comics. And that's something that is important to me, because I'm writing weird books, these aren't just, you kind of gotta already be a little bit interested and get it. I know it's niche. It's not, superhero stuff. There's totally a place for that stuff, or real fantasy. There's a place for that stuff, but I needed kind of somebody who kind of got that. And I think they do. And I think, the other great thing is, like I was saying a little bit earlier, I don't love doing self-promotion. I don't like social media. It's hard. It's actually hard for me to do those things. I would rather be writing, and to know that I have people behind me who are willing to who are in my corner to do that stuff is so valuable. I can't overstate that.
Interesting discussion too. Oh, it's so interesting.
Because it's hard. You have to be everything now if you want to crowdfund. So
this business, I'm going to ask you a very interesting question, and I want you to take a guess. How much time do you actually think I spend writing interviews, doing interviews, versus doing everything else? Because I do everything in my business. It's just me. There's no help. There's nobody else doing any of this. I will give you some clues. I'm going to be hitting about 180 interviews this year. And every interview is between an hour to 2 hours on average, usually about an hour and 20 minutes. So take a percentage, and then we'll see how close you are. Not to put you on the spot, but it's going to illustrate a point.
I would say you prepare for each hour of interviewing, you and I talking, that you do on the order of 3x. So because you had to read the books, you had to find people to interview, you had to think about questions and kind of plan the conversation a little bit and do all of the scheduling setup. Other than that, other than the actual interviewing in terms of promotion and social media, I don't know. I feel like I see you all the time on Facebook, hustling pretty hard. I don't know.
So I'll give a really good position. Scheduling is to find guests can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 10 hours. In an average week, I spend about 5 hours finding guests. That's to find 4 guests takes about 5 hours.
Wow.
It is complicated, and if you do, on average, if you look at it over 52 weeks, I did 90 last year, 180 this year. Reason why I bring this up, so that's 5 hours. Then I'm doing approximately about 5 hours of interviewing, so that's 10 hours. I promote like a mad dog. And also, it's not just me promoting. I spend 30 to 40 minutes actually writing my copy. Now, sometimes I'll just write lazy copy. But, I just started promoting Dan Smith's book, and I'm like, do you need a Halloween book? That thing took me about 25 minutes to write that copy. I rewrote it 4 times to push that out there because I need something catchy. It's a question mark. He gave me a promo code to drop in there, figuring out where to drop that in, using hashtags. I have software that helps me generate hashtags, and then I also look at what hashtags are in groups. Nothing is just blindly done.
No, and that's hard. Like, I know it takes a lot of time, and that's the kind of stuff I just I can't.
So, and it's also really complicated now because last year the competition wasn't 10x. It's more like it's 100x now, where there are so many people who have been on my show who now have shows themselves. Not everybody's sticking around. Not everybody does 4 or 5 interviews a week. Not everybody does in different sectors. That's the other thing too, is that I'm just not a comic guy. I'm a wrestling guy. I'm a cosplay guy. I'm a voice acting guy. I'm mainstream comics. I mean, it's not just straight up indie comics. So this actually, the interviewing component of what I do is 20% at best. The other 80% of what I do is managing other things. I am, it's not a secret, I'm launching a Kickstarter for this project, and building that thing out is complicated. Understanding me being on other shows. I am on 2 shows a week right now.
Yeah.
And I want to get on 3 shows a week all of 2022. And that's my baseline. So, and
that's
I don't
nightmare.
I don't just talk about this. I talk about other things like comic book investing and other things. So I am building out my brand extensively. There's a reason why I watch 2 hours of wrestling a week. I will watch like an episode of anime every night. I haven't read a book in forever. On Thursday nights are my nights off, and I legitimately will watch like 6 hours of anime and 2 hours of wrestling, and then I will go to sleep. I don't work on Thursdays but every other night I'm working. And even on my Thursdays, I'm pushing things out. I'm pushing content out. I'm looking for guests. It doesn't just happen. I'm commenting on things. I'm about to get a lot more interesting where I'm going to start commenting in a lot of Facebook groups, just saying, hey, how's your project going? And doing stuff like that and having a bigger act of, Twitter. I'm going to spend like 2 hours every Sunday on Twitter just responding to people's tweets. So that's what's crazy about my world. But I also understand a lot of stuff. I mean, actively looking for sponsors. That takes up time. Understanding who to identify, looking at their reach, understanding how to pitch to them, understanding their keywords. And I am going to be starting a 9-to-5 job on top of all this. So I am unique, not to mention that I'm managing 15 other things that everybody else manages in your life, including my stock portfolio. And I actively manage that. So the reason why I bring all this up is there's a reason why I'm not writing a comic, because I'm spent. I enjoy understanding all of this, and I think so many creators don't understand this. And I think it's a real problem where I think that if you're a creator, the greatest thing you can do before you hand off your social media is understanding every little element of it, because I come from the philosophy that if eventually I'm going to shift out my social media to somebody else. But when I ask you to do something on social media, I've already done it. Right. I'm not going to ask somebody to do something that I already haven't done.
Because then you appreciate it. You know what you're looking for. Yeah.
Also, I think it constitutes some form of respect.
Oh, yeah.
If I asked somebody to do something and I wouldn't do it myself, like knock on a door, for instance, I think it's the idea that, constitutes respect. But my whole thing about, all of this is that I think creators definitely need to be in their own social media. I think handing over your social media to somebody else, it doesn't help because when I'm speaking to a creator, I've been using Scott Snyder as an example because he's well known. I want to know it's Scott's voice on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it Scout tweeting out for you.
Oh no, and I don't. That wouldn't happen. They don't do that either, to my knowledge. Maybe they would if I asked. But what I mean is more getting into comic stores, like getting in the, into more reviews, like those kind of things where I've been like, I tried to beat the pavement with my last series and just send a billion emails out. Like, do you want to carry this? I will mail it to you. And that kind of stuff takes away from my writing time. So I always resent it a little bit.
So have you, I'm going to ask a very interesting question. This is actually going to be very interesting. Do you know what the Dream 100 is? Do you actually have a Dream 100 list?
Of like the dream stores that you want to be in?
No, Dream 100. Dream 100 could be anything. So the Dream 100's basic concept is that you take a list of the top 100 in whatever social media or whatever, technically brick and mortar, gyms, if whatever, and you say, okay, here are the places I want to be, or the people I want to know, or influencers I want to connect with. Can I work my way in? Can I buy my way in? And then once you start figuring out your Dream 100, because if you have a Dream 100 and then you go to Scout, your results are going to be 10x what they can provide with their network.
Because I can say this is
because you've identified who your dream core is, and obviously I'm oversimplifying it dramatically, but the basic concept is that I'm building out mine right now. Mm-hmm. So there are people, and then all of a sudden you can say, look, I can't get in. I use Tony Robbins. Everybody knows who Tony Robbins is. I don't think Tony Robbins is a good fit, but if you're a self-help guru and you want to get on Tony Robbins, you could buy ad space on Tony Robbins' Facebook page, for instance. Mm-hmm. So you can market to certain customers. So if there's a comic that is a mainstream phenomenon 3 years ago, who's a comic writer very similar to what you're doing, but you're just adding a different twist, and they have 70,000 Facebook people on their page, you can actually on Facebook do ads directly to their customers and on their Facebook page. And if you identify them, all of a sudden you're now pinning down an audience. And this is what I love to understand and utilize, because this is how you really build an audience. And most comic creators and artists, nobody wants to deal with this. And, even Scout, because it's a pain in the ass. And I'm not trying to single out Scout. What I just described is a pain in the ass to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's whole marketing firms that you hire that they do this.
There are people who legitimately make millions and millions of dollars to do this. And even those marketing firms have a hard time doing this because it's tricky. It's tricky and it works like 30% of the time. But you need to know what you're doing and you need to actually do it the right way. And you need to also understand what is your core. That's why it only works 30% of the time, because a lot of the time people don't understand what their Dream 100 is. I know when I'm building out right now, I'm building out the podcast side, I legitimately have gone through 50 podcasts. And out of those 50, I'm interested in 20 of them. And then I'm looking for the next 20. Then I'm looking for the next 20. And then I'm going to be doing it with Instagram influencers. And I'm going to be looking for it with other people. And then you keep going. And then all of a sudden, you have a Dream 700 list. And then if you hand that over to Scout, I guarantee you, they're going to be able to amplify that to 7,000. But I digress right there. That's inside marketing. I'm not a marketing guy. I just happen to spend a lot of time learning all this stuff because I'm in the middle of a crisis and I need to get my marketing better. And I can't afford to hire somebody to do it.
If I can ask you a question, because I've been thinking about this a lot. I just did Comic-Con last weekend. I tried to make a point of messaging everybody in my last Kickstarter campaign personally. I like talking to people. I love talking to people one-on-one. I love meeting people, hearing what they think about the book. I've gotten so many fun emails already from Comic-Con. It's did you see this weird capybara infestation? That I'm the person that somebody thought to send that to from meeting me once at Comic-Con is such a victory. And I don't think you get that from Facebook ads, ever. That's my theory is that's so hard to get unless you're you.
What? See, I'm in a complete different camp.
Yeah.
I'm never going back to a Comic-Con. And the whole thing for me is that I'm beyond accessible. My DMs on Twitter are open. if somebody wants to say, hey, can we talk? I got this great idea. Somebody could shoot me an email, and a bunch of people have my phone number. Somebody was like, yo, man, can I interview you? You got like 5. Can I interview you in 5 minutes? Okay, here's my phone number. Send me a text. There's a bunch of people who have my phone number. There's a bunch of wrestlers who have my phone number too, and I have theirs. And a bunch of people, but for me, I'm interested in marketing to the masses. I'm not interested in a one-on-one conversation. One-on-one conversations don't do it for me because it's great, but I'm also a business at this point, where my business is my podcast. It's my brand. The Pop Anime Comics brand is not just this. I'm teaching comic book investing. I got some other stuff. I have a t-shirt out there. I'm going to be building another one sooner rather than later. And I like to make fun of anime and food and combine the two. And so I am building a holding company. So my whole entire argument and where I'm at is personal conversations are fun. I love having them, but I'm also trying to market to the masses. And so the way I view everything, and it's the anti-comic because it's a business to me, is that I'm trying to sell as many ad spots as possible, get as many listeners, try to raise up my ad cost spots, trying to sell as many t-shirts as humanly possible, because at the end of the day, I want money, I want to grow my business, and I want to grow my following. And well, I don't even care about growing my following, I care about getting paid.
Yeah, you're doing a different thing then.
And even when I'm planning to write a comic in March and run it on Kickstarter, my whole goal is legitimately to make enough money to buy a house with that money. And it goes into the way I do marketing, because it's not that I'm not interested in producing a quality item. It's that if I produce a quality product, my goal is that I want a lot of people to buy it. And so I'm trying to get it in front of as many eyes as possible. And if you shoot me a message but I'll speak to you at a comic shop. I'll speak to people online. I got no problem. Somebody DMs me, in my Twitter or on Facebook, I'll speak to you. And there are people I've never met in person. Most people I've never met in person who I've interviewed, and we just met on Facebook. And it's the idea for me, though, is that I'm trying to sell product. And that's the entire purpose, because I understand I'm a business. Now, if you're at a Comic-Con and that's your personal interaction, that's cool and all. But at the end of the day, I'm going to ask you a question. When your project funded on Kickstarter, is your goal at that point to then have raise 4 times as much so that you're funded for the next Kickstarter and then some? Or is the idea, to have more of a personal connection? This is the whole problem with me and Kickstarters right now, is that some people view Kickstarter as a business, and some people say, hey, look, this is a passion, and that this is where I take my excess funds that doesn't impact my life. And I'm looking not to necessarily have a business, but I'm looking to fulfill a niche and an itch of my life. And not to put you on the spot, for me, this is a business.
Yeah.
It's a fun business. And when I write my comic, I want to sell that idea to TV. And I want to collect, a nice option fee, and then a nice, whatever else comes out after you get option. You get like a percentage, or you get an episode fee. I'm not exactly sure the whole thing, but I'm looking to go that route and get a nice payday out of it, on top of having a bunch of books and then hike them up on eBay, because I run an eBay business too. So comics for me are just a business, and the personal stuff is secondary. It's not firstary. I don't know if that answers the question. I'm very honest about how I feel, and I know it irks me.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fair. And I think a lot of respect to you for being upfront and like knowing what you want out of all of this. I think for me, I write other things as well, and I see it primarily as a craft, and I want to be as good as humanly possible at my craft. That's always how I felt. Like, I want to be the best writer I can possibly be by the end of my life. I want to continuously improve. I want to tell stories that people are going to be like, holy shit, that was so good. And they tell 5 of their friends. And that's what I think I'm coming at this from a very different angle. Yes, I do want my Kickstarters to fund. I want them to make money. I want, to be able to keep producing these books because people really love them and connect with them. And that those two things are not mutually exclusive in any way. But I think that's my primary, that's the reason. So the reason I do crowdfunding, the reason I did Comic-Con is to find readers, not necessarily customers.
I mean,
but
I could
readers.
tell you why. I could tell you why I'm launching my Kickstarter. My Kickstarter has one purpose and only one purpose only. I want emails. That's all I want. Legitly, Kickstarter is one of the greatest email collectors on the planet. And that's all I want, because growing an email list is one of the hardest things to do. And I've come to the conclusion that me getting money isn't a problem. To run my project, and when I run my Kickstarter for the podcast and for this, the goal is not all that much money. To run this project is like $500 to $800 a year. That's not a lot of money in reality. A few sponsorships here and there done right, I'll be perfectly fine. And then slowly growing, and then slowly raise your sponsorship rates, and you'll make real money. And then you do better. And then you have sponsors every month. You're going to do fine in this space. I want emails so that I can take it and I can send every episode I do every week to everybody on my list. So they have a direct thing, especially if you attach it to Facebook, which then gets the secondary marketing, which then affects and changes Facebook's algorithm around. And I'm subverting Facebook's algorithm. That's the only reason why I'm interested in Kickstarter. It's a whole different way how to view Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. To me, it's just an email collector that has a monetary component to it, in which that I figured out what Kickstarter is to me. Kickstarter is a gigantic funnel. And it's a whole different ballgame. And when you start understanding this stuff, like, this is how I get really fascinated. I love operations and logistics. This is like me having just diving to like a pool of chocolate pudding. Because once you start understanding what it does, and once you start understanding what is really valuable in Kickstarter, because if you do Kickstarter right and you have a lot of backers give you their emails, those emails are worth more than the rewards by far, and by far the amount of money. Because now you have an email list, and then you can directly market to your email list every time you have something, and you put that into MailChimp or another email subscriber list, and you're good to go. And every time you're at a con, boom, you have a con exclusive for this book. Boom, you could put it into an email list, say, hey guys, I got 50 of these left. Who wants it on eBay right now, right here? And you could really sell the back end really nicely.
I guess my position on all of that is that I think if I'm not making something people want, they'll unsubscribe. So that's what I attack. Like, that's what I go after, is I got to make something that people really want and that they'll talk about naturally, because that's what I'm comfortable doing. I think it's what I'm better at. It's what I'm interested in. Like, I definitely don't see Kickstarter in the same way. I think I see it as, maybe it's similar. It's a way to find and access a group of people who otherwise wouldn't know who you are, because that platform has so many users. They have their own algorithm going on. Like, they're really good about showing things to people.
I could go right now and build a funnel on ClickFunnels the exact same way your project is built. So identical. No question about it. The difference is that Kickstarter has traffic.
Right. That I don't have as an individual yet. But
so, even if you did, why do you think Scott Snyder? Why do you think Jeff Lemire? Why do you think Ryan Brown and Charles Soule are on there? Why do you think Boom Studios is on there? It's not that Boom Studios doesn't have traffic. Mm-hmm. They could have gone on ClickFunnels and kept another 10% for themselves. They wouldn't have done 1.3 million. If they weren't on Kickstarter, they would have done 300,000 if they did it on ClickFunnels. Not because they wouldn't have been running ads, but because it wasn't, sexy. It wasn't fun. It wasn't, the hip thing to do.
It's a social thing too. Like, it makes it into a movement. Like, it's like you're joining something that's palpable.
It's also a brand. Kickstarter's a brand. Indiegogo's a brand. Zoop is not a brand right now. No offense to Zoop.
Zoop. Oh no, I haven't heard of Zoop. Is it crowdfunding?
Zoop is a crowdfunder, but it's. I don't want to say it's bad, because it's not bad, but it's just not.
I thought you were making up a word.
No. It's real. It's sort of brand new, and it's kind of like, I think it's safe to say that Indiegogo and Kickstarter are the two main ones. And that's not to dismiss anything else that's out there. It's just the idea that, unfortunately, you're either Indiegogo or your Kickstarter. If you said, hey, your project was on Indiegogo, I wouldn't have viewed it disrespectfully. If you said your project was on Zoop, I would have said, what the fuck, Zoop? I would have responded.
Like I just did. We're sorry, Zoop. We don't mean it. We just don't know.
No. I don't have I don't have the same respect for Zoop because it's just brand new. It doesn't carry the same weight as Kickstarter, Indiegogo does. And it's nothing against Zoop as a platform. It's just that, when you start something new and it has a little bit of traction, it's kind of, I take it less serious because I view it more as a joke. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to Zoop or any project on Zoop, but I'm saying to myself, like, if you were on Indiegogo, I wouldn't have viewed it any different than Kickstarter, is where I'm going with that. But I digress. It's a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, it's nice also talking because you have such a different perspective on it than me. On this end, on publishers and all that stuff, it's interesting, like, to talk about this stuff.
I'm very different because I'm not an indie content. I'm not an indie comic creator, and which that I came from mainstream. I am a podcaster. That's all I do right now, and I'm about to use Kickstarter for the first time, and I'm using it in more of a podcast format, and I comment on comics. I also came from mainstream. I still am in mainstream. I'm also in the professional wrestling community. I'm in the cosplay community. And I'm in the anime voice acting community. And so it's a very different perspective. And I also have seen a lot of stuff go both ways. And I understand what Netflix does. When Netflix has a $20 billion budget and they produce a shit show like Legacy, and people, oh, what a bad move by Netflix. And I say, that was brilliant what they did. Because they own that forever. It doesn't matter. It's shit. They have built out a library. Netflix, if you go on Netflix, I would say 20% of the Netflix original shows are bad. But they own it forever. So if you're looking at Netflix as a 30-year company, and this kind of goes back to my indie theory, my theory isn't just dumbfounded, whereas the idea that if a comic company goes and buys a 6-issue thing that was funded on Kickstarter, and it turns out that thing's a bomb, but they have the rights to sell that for 10 years, for lack of a better word, well, you know what it is? Maybe it'll hit year 5, or maybe, you know what it is? They'll make $600 a year on it, or they'll make $1,000 a year on it. And guess what? They have it in their library for a while. And that's why I say it's this shotgun approach, because I understand I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it, is that the things that are determining entertainment right now are on-demand big libraries and customization/choice. And having a big library of content to choose from is what's really one of the driving factors. We look at Netflix, we look at Peacock, we look at Hulu, we look at Amazon, Disney, Crunchyroll, all that stuff is big libraries. Funimation, big libraries. That's
like an arms race at this point. Like, you can't really get into the game if you have a small. You've got one nuke.
I mean, video games, Game Pass, Xbox, and PS5. I mean, that's a big deal. And what your Game Pass is that you're getting a bunch of unlimited stuff, and you're getting the ability to choose from at least 7,000 games. I mean, it's definitely becoming a big library game. And that's how I think. But I digress. I have a very different opinion than everybody in the comic industry, and people call me wrong. And people called me wrong about the Keanu Reeves things when I said it was bad in Kickstarter. And I said, there's going to be a problem when that thing dries up, and there's going to be oxygen. It's going to come into the room, and it's going to leave just the same way. And it did. It's again, I'm very contrary. It's just how I've been taught to invest, and the same rules apply in a lot of stuff. And sure, I miss a bunch of stuff as an investor and as an analyzer, but I'm also right on stuff that people haven't seen yet. And I'm fortunate enough that I'm spoiled, because wrestling is about 3 steps ahead of comics right now. Whatever's happening in the wrestling world is comics are about 3 steps behind it.
My cousin's a wrestler. I think he's with AEW. I don't follow wrestling at all. I But I remember they were all so into it when they were kids, and it's like, that's really cool that you can follow your dreams like that. Like, it's like a very like, yeah, I was really into comics. Like, good job, buddy. Like, I'm very proud. Um, yeah, but I don't really follow it at all.
very interesting, but
Yeah.
I digress. We could have a very, very, very sophisticated comment for the next hour on this topic alone, because I am I guess the black sheep in the entire comic world, and everybody disagrees with me, and we'll see who's right in 3 years. And I'm going to be flaunting this in front of everybody's face, and you're not the first person who's heard this, and I can't wait to be like, remember when I said this was going to happen? And everybody's like,
play the clip.
and so if I'm wrong, okay, but I don't think I am. But anyway, let's talk about rewards, because this is let's get back into your book and away from the actual business and pontificating about everything. So obviously there's a bunch of rewards. So there's obviously the digital stuff out there. So you can get it digital, and that's part one, which is issues 1 and 2. Yep. I think the comic script is in the digital. I think the concept is, and well, you're not paying for shipping on the digital because it's sent digitally. I don't know how to
scam.
I don't know how to explain that any other way. It's also cheaper, and also if you're international, well, shipping is a bitch.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And so shipping,
it's like $20-something. I think it's like $25 right now to the EU, not counting packaging, just postage for a book.
Canada, it's what, like 20?
It's about 22. Yeah.
And then the US, it's like, what is it, averaging about $11, give or take?
Not Media Mail, and because these are books, I'm able to do it Media Mail. The only thing you can't do Media Mail is something that has ads in it. That's the rule that my post office told me. So that is just under $4. So if it's like if it's something that has, I think it's like a certain percentage of ad space in it, you can't do Media Mail anymore. There is like a marketing mail option. Like they have options for this, but
because I ship everything like priority. And
that's expensive.
It's about $10-11, but I also am an eBay seller, and I get $50 insurance. And so when I'm selling a book, and I'll pay extra. If it's a $100 book, I'm going to insure for $100.
Right.
You know,
look at Media Mail, because it's flat. It's less than $4. It's not flat. I'm sorry. There is a small increase with weight.
Yes.
But it's like under $4 for postage.
My shipping on my eBay store is more expensive than others, but it's also insured, and insurance is included. And
you can do insurance in Media Mail.
I also like to ship in Geminis.
I do that too.
And so it's just that I just do priority, and I work much better, because there's been issues in the past, and within 24 hours I refund, because I know I'm going to be covered by insurance.
Right. I use stamps.com. I was able to get insurance on all of my rewards that I shipped out with my last campaign. And I did a Gemini mailer in a bubble mailer with the postage on it. And I didn't have any, like, nothing got lost. It was okay. It's a big difference if you're able to do that.
Yeah. I don't even use bubble mailers. I just ship straight Gemini, bubble wrap the comic, and I'm good. And I do really well with it. And, I know exactly what I'm charging, and I'm doing great on it. It's perfect. And
you're paying $8 more than I am.
Yeah, but when you're selling books that are $100, $200, my clientele wants it a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if they choose, then that's
they want it a certain way, and I don't let them choose. They get it shipped the way that I know how it's going to arrive perfect. Because at a certain point, you know, I don't mind if a Kickstarter sends something a certain way, because I don't view a Kickstarter the same way. But when I've sold like a $400 book that was raw.
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
It's the idea that they want it a certain way. And my Geminis and the way it's protected and the way it's shipped, you know, I just know how to do it the right way. And people, when you're spending real money, people don't care if shipping's like $20 because, well, you're spending a lot of money. But I digress. So obviously it's digital, no shipping, but then you have the Quadros cover, and I might be getting these slightly out of order. So I'm not too sure if I'm doing this out of order yet, but that's
no, you're good so far. Yeah, that's one of the covers. That's George in DC. So that's our interior artist, George Quadros in DC Alonso.
So I did get it right then.
You did. Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes when I put these images in, they get messed up. So this is one of those covers, and then this is a interior page right there.
Right. Yep.
And then this is the other cover, because I think you only have 2 covers out there.
Yes, 2 variants for this. Yeah.
And so that's the other cover, and that was done by Medell, I want to say.
Ariel Medell and Saul Chavanas did this one.
I just want to be careful because I'm bad at names.
That's fine.
And
it's hard when you only read things online.
And so one of the cool things is that both of these, I think, are the same price as far as a Kickstarter goes and what you're charging. And it's pretty reasonable for both parts. And so obviously what went into that and what's the story behind this and keeping it affordable. And also, because I'm sure you back a bunch of Kickstarters where cover A is one price, cover B is another price, cover C is a third price, and then the list goes onward. So what was that entire mentality behind that and really keeping it affordable? Because it is an affordable project.
Yeah, and I wanted it to be accessible to people. Like, I want people to read it. I want people to buy it. Like, if they want it, I want them to be able to get it. And I don't, I modeled out like a few different prices and how many backers I'd need to meet different goals and like how it would kind of work out. And this seemed like the right spot. Like $11 was kind of a sweet spot. With the 2 different covers, it's simplifying it for me too. Like, I think they're both beautiful. I want people to have like the cover that they want, and they're both great. So.
Yeah. And that's something interesting as well, where obviously there's a tier for both covers. I think you're also offering the digital with either of these covers as well.
The digital version will have the Medell cover and then George's cover. Like, you'll flip through both basically.
No. What I mean is that you're not going to charge somebody extra if they buy a physical.
No.
I've seen that on Kickstarters. It drives me crazy. When I'm buying a $25 variant, I know, and the person selling it knows, I'm not reading the comic. So give me the digital too. And if you don't, I find it offensive.
Oh no, everyone gets the digital if they buy the physical. Yeah.
And then also you offer a cool tier where you can choose and vote on a monster /pest for part 2. And obviously that's very interesting, what people can choose, and obviously having a say in the book, and that you give out what's sort of coming about and possibly a new creature. And that's always a fun tier to grant somebody. So, and that's also a high tier where that's like $180.
That's 180. Yeah.
180.
Yeah. So those are both sold out happily as of like this morning.
Those help to fund books tremendously.
And it's like, that's the kind of thing I like, is being able to talk to the person who's like working on the book and like, yeah, you have a say in it. Like, you can be a part of it. Like, that's the cool thing about being like, these people are all involved in the production of this book in different ways. So like, it's kind of leveling that up a little bit.
Yeah, no. I think a lot of people also who are big comic fans want to be part of books, and not everybody can do a comic book, but buying a commission, buying, a piece in the book, having some component, having a character in the book, even if it's in the background, or having, an essential dialogue line. I've seen that done a lot. Those are always fun. And also people give these things as gifts to people. I've seen that a lot, and I've seen some creative things that people have done. I've seen people give other people rubs, and purposely like mess with their friends in comics and buy stuff. I've seen that.
Like, you're gonna die in this book, haha, kind of.
So I've seen people do this, and a few people have done it. And if you look hard enough on the internet, where one person will buy something and it's like you have a character killed in the book and they'll have their best friend killed in the book and they'll give their friend it and then their friend responds back, oh, it's brilliant. It becomes a very interesting game because it's how far can you push it. Super interesting. But one of the things that I really like about your Kickstarter, and I'm actually doing it for mine, is you have very few rewards and they're very simple. And I've been on Kickstarter where there has been like 70 rewards. And after a while, and look, I understand there's new variants of the same book, there's packages, and I get it sometimes. I also understand that you might have 6 covers, and then you might have foils of those covers, and then you have metals of those covers, and you have versions of those covers. I get all of it, but also at a certain point, it gets excessive. And
because you don't know where to look. Like, what do you want? Do you want the metal? Do you want the foil? Like, I think it's friendlier to the customer.
It also goes back to funnelinics, where the whole point of a Kickstarter is that there is a point where there are too many choices to be made.
Right.
You know, you go into the grocery store, if there is 300 different brands of milk and you go in, that becomes a problem.
That would be really funny. Yeah.
There's 10. You only have 10 choices of milk, you know, and I use that because if you went to the grocery store and there was 50 or 100 or 300 choices of milk, you would go insane.
Well, you just slap something off the shelf, or you go to a different store. Yeah, yeah.
At a certain point, you're just going to choose one, or conversely, you're going to go to something that has less of an option.
Right.
Especially if you never bought milk before, you know, because you're going to have no idea.
Imagine the situation: somebody has never encountered milk in their life, and they walk into a display of 300 guys.
No. Do you know what the hardest thing for an immigrant in the United States is?
Oh, the grocery stores that are.
What aisle?
12,000 square feet. Yeah.
What aisle? There's a particular aisle that immigrants coming to the United States for the first time have an extremely hard time in.
What aisle? I'm guessing it's the milk aisle if we're talking about it right now, or is it like the frozen food aisle?
It's the cereal aisle.
There are so many cereals.
In most countries that immigrants are from, when they're coming to the United States for the first time, have 3 or 4 options of cereal. You go into the United States, you have Pokemon cereal, you have Fruit Loops, you have Rice Krispies, and you have Applejack cereal, and then you have Count Chocula.
And then 1,100 Cheerios.
And then you got Cheerios, and then you got Kix, and then you got Wheaties, and you got Raspberry Wheaties, you know? And it's funny, and everybody's going to laugh at this when I cut this up, but it's not. If you see somebody bewildered in a cereal aisle and they have a little bit of an accent or they have clothes that's slightly different, chances are they need help. And I don't mean they need help with mental. I mean,
it's weird. Yeah.
You might need to say, hey, it's going to be all right. Let me help you with your cereal. Okay. It might be a reasonable question to ask.
None of this makes any sense. Yeah.
I'm just saying. It's a concern. And I've never seen it, but I read it.
I felt that way once when I was traveling. I went to a grocery store in Slovakia, and there was a very large aisle of pate, like ground up meat in a can, which I don't eat, but it's like I stood there for a while just like, how are there this many kinds of pate, which is a thing I've never seen before in a grocery store in the US. I am truly amazed. So I think I can empathize a little bit with those people.
And so that's just beyond interesting. But I appreciate simple Kickstarters because if you give me less choices, I don't have to make as many, and it's easier, and especially if prices are reasonable. It is very helpful when I have 5 to 7 choices versus 25 choices. Because sensory overload is real. I do a lot of stuff, and also sometimes it's just simpler. And I would imagine your fulfillment is also much simpler as well.
It is, yeah.
And so that's the rewards, and then obviously I want to back out of rewards, and I am curious because you were just.
Can I show you one thing, like a special preview of one reward? Ta-da! We had patches made, so you can put these on your clothes and pretend you're a pest controller. It's part of the Works reward thing, or you can get it as an add-on. But it's a little Iron Man patch. How cute is that?
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So obviously I want to back out of that, and I am curious. Obviously, I have an opinion about cons. I am part of the great digitalization pivot, meaning that not cons are becoming digital because I still think physical is going to rule everything. I really do. I just think marketing and having a bigger digital online presence is what's going to dictate the future. And I think that understanding how to utilize that and really build out what your platform looks like digitally is going to matter in the next 10 years, and I think we're starting to see it happen. But having said that, where do you think cons are going? I think you were at New York Comic Con.
Mhm.
Obviously I haven't been to a con in forever, and there's a good chance I'm not going to come back, because it's just I'm making more money. I've been doing cons for almost 10 years, and I'm making more money than I've ever made outside of conventions in comics than I did when I was there. I
Mhm.
actually lost money by going to cons
Oh
before,
yeah.
and now I am making more money, and I'm probably going to make a hell of a lot more money in 2022, outside of cons again, because, well, I know what I'm doing to some degree, in this space. And so I'm curious where you think they're going, where do you think cons are going, comics going, Kickstarter's going, and all that stuff, because it's a very interesting field
Mhm.
from both, because I don't know how New York Comic Con was conducted. I don't know what the vibe was.
It was wonderful, honestly. Like, I've been going to New York Comic Con for many years as a guest. This was my first time tabling. Like, I will 100% do it again if I get in for next year. Like, more than healthy ROI on the table, and like what I printed, like I feel like I did great sales wise after I kind of got used to like getting people to come over to the table with. I was sharing a table with JL Johnson Jr., who wrote Ennead and created it, and he's awesome. And we have kind of like books that work together. So like he has an epic fantasy book. My book is historical fantasy. And then next to us was Stephen Johnson, who has another awesome book that you might like or have heard of, Everborn. So he's such a good salesman. It's ridiculous. He was just like setting them up and knocking them down. Like, come over here. Can I tell you about this? And he did really great. And I learned a lot from him. But the kind of, I guess, the takeaway from that is, as somebody who doesn't like doing all the stuff online, and I think this comes back to like deeper held beliefs that I have, I think, that are, I don't want to be competing for people's attention constantly on the internet. Like, I think there's so much of that going on. I have like issues with the way the internet treats people, really, like the way ads treat people, like the way that you're constantly bombarded, and it feels like you're in a shoving match. Like, you're always elbowing somebody out of the way. And like, I know that's like getting off into left field a little bit over here, but I appreciated the convention so much because it was people I knew wanted to be there. Anybody who was in Artist Alley like last weekend was like excited to be there. Everyone was really nice. They were like looking forward to talking to other human beings after this last like year and a half that we had. And they wanted to hear about the book. And it was like so good to be able to talk to them about it and like kind of show how excited I am about it. And like, they bought it and it was great. I gave away a Torque necklace at my booth and got, people signed up for my emails because of that. And like, it benefited in lots of different ways from being there. And then I think too, just the exposure of like, people walked past and like, they saw my name, Andraste, New Rat City, like it's in there kind of now. And I think it takes a few different contacts to like decide to jump in and pick something up. Like, you have to kind of see something a few times to do that. And like, I think this was a really good way for me to like get in front of a lot of people and like build up some of that without having to do the online stuff that I don't love doing, if that makes sense.
So
Temperamentally for me, it was great.
I'll explain my position on. So I've been getting attention.
This is like debate team because we're like opposite.
No. But this is actually super cool. I have not told this story before, so you're going to be the first to hear it. And everybody who's listening to it. So I have a very physical disability, and I've had it, and it's a genetic condition. So what I did is that I said to myself, look, I can't go run around a convention because I started an anime cons. So I said, what can I do to get people to me? And how do I compete with having a disadvantage where I can't go running around. I can't, be active. I can't run with the wolves, for lack of a better word. So I said, let me build a panel. And let me actually build a concept, whether I'm talking about Gundam, and let me actually do something sophisticated. And then you start building out really good panels and building out good concepts and start building out stuff. And then you start attracting people to you. So that's not, and this is how I got into all of this. And this is why I have a different opinion than a lot of other people, because I've been doing that for almost 12 years now. So I've been attracting people to me at cons with having better concepts and outperforming people. And there were paid guests who were speaking, and I was doing better in my panels as somebody who was 4 or 5 in than the 2 people next to me in their panels, because I had a better concept. And so I said, hey, how do I compete? How do I outperform people? How do I outthink people? So when I look at ads and I'm like, hey, how do I outperform you based on that? How do I build a better product, and then how do I market it better than you? And so that's why I have a very different idea of why I like the internet, because I can compete on the internet where it's the great equalizer.
Right.
And physically, I can't do a con, not to mention that also my product is digital. And the product I'm building out an entire comic book investing system class. So it'd be sort of stupid for me to sell a digital product at a con.
Right.
When
where you don't want to be anyway. Yeah.
So I'll go to a con and do a lecture on it. I've done that, but I'm not going to go sit at a table and sell it that way, unless maybe I should. I mean, it's not. I'm not against it, but it would have to be done a certain way. So, but I digress on that. Again, I'm probably not going to do a con for a while, because I'm looking at my wounds from a really bad, not good experience, and I'm still licking my wounds from it. From over about 22 months ago. And it's probably going to take a lot for me to come back. And right now, I don't have an appetite for it. I don't. And I love lecturing. I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's sort of tainted for me in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate that one bad con can ruin things. But I love doing this more, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I do it from my house, and it's great. And it's also less invasive. And I feel also I could help more people, because I push this out, gets 200 views. Out of those 200 views, statistically, at least 4 people are going to at least look at the Kickstarter. At least. And out of those 4 people, I can't make any promises, but, you're in the game once people start looking at your Kickstarter.
If they're looking and that's great to me. And
so,
email me, message me. I'm also very accessible.
I feel that with the panels and things like that, I felt that I couldn't help anybody. And I felt like I wasn't really helping anybody with this. I feel at least I'm granting people press. How far my press goes, well, that's up for debate. But I digress right there. That's very personal. It's very personal. But I mean, it's going to be tellable anyway. I'm going to be doing like 60 interviews in the next, 8 weeks anyhow. Yeah. But anyhow, I digress right there. So obviously, I want to give you an opportunity for self-promotion. So where can people find New Rat City? Where can people find you on social media? Where can people force you to respond on social media? Where can people bother you on social media and actually get you out of the cave, active every day for 3 hours at the minimum?
Oh, Jesus, no. I got stuff to read.
And then you can't get up until you've done 3 hours on Twitter.
All over again.
All jokes aside, though, where can people find you and back the project and check you out and all that stuff?
Yeah, so New Rat City is live on Kickstarter, New Rat City Part 1. We are on Instagram at new_rat_city. If you can believe it, New Rat City was taken. So we had to do that. We also have a website at newratcitycomic.com. My other series has a website. It's called Andraste. So that website is andrastecomic.com, and that's where my blog is. So I write a lot about the cost of making a comic as an independent creator, like how much it actually cost me to make those 3 issues of the series.
I know exactly how much. I know exactly how much.
You've read it, and then all the logistical concerns
I knew it
too,
before I read it.
historical things. Yeah. It's a lot. But then I have a newsletter as well. So I have a newsletter, a tiny letter that you can find via that website. And that's more where I write about like the weirdo historical things that I find when I'm researching my books. But that's like news and updates too.
Yeah, and then a lot of stuff's going on, and then I'm going to keep saying it, but you have to support indie comics, and you have to support indie content creators, and what that really means for those who are interested is you have to back people's Kickstarters, and you have to back it, whether that's digital or a physical book, and then even going further than just backing it, what you should be doing is sharing it out on Facebook, Twitter, letting people know you backed it. Also, if you know people who are interested in these types of comics or might be interested, sharing it to them, send them into a message, tell them about it, show them, on your computer that you backed it. Because, well, let's be realistic, algorithms are really, really tricky on Facebook, and certain things don't show up. Your algorithm that Facebook shows you and mine are very different. And so it's very important that, certain things just pop up across my desk, and I'm like, hey, this is 20 days into its campaign. How did I not see it before? And it gets very, very interesting when that happens. So obviously more people share it, more places it goes, more people Facebook exposes it to, and more people can potentially back. So it's very important that people share. And even going beyond that, liking Facebook pages, liking Instagrams, liking Twitters, all that stuff is free. There's other social media platforms out there as well, liking those, checking out our website. Yeah, Zoop. Gotta give Zoop some love here, clearly.
Tell your weird friend who loves rats. That's all I want.
And that too. So on that note, also just everybody knows I am an indie content creator myself. I do have a sponsor. My sponsor covers a lot of stuff, but they don't cover everything. I have Buy Me a Coffee, so I appreciate when people actually buy me a coffee. But what I really appreciate more than that is I actually appreciate a share. It means so much more when actually somebody shares out my interviews. And oddly enough, people will actually rather give me money than share an interview, which is crazy. You legitimately can make me smile by sharing it. Click that share button and I will smile. But
wherever he's in the world.
That's what I really want, is I want people to share it, like it, engage with it, check the next one out, watch a bunch of my other stuff, and actually talk to me because I'm pretty accessible. And if you send me a DM, on my Facebook page or on YouTube or on Twitter or Instagram, I will respond. And I appreciate everybody who shares this out. And if you're so inclined, money's great too. But more importantly, really a share is nice. And it goes a long way for me. It's like a thank you. Thank you can make my bad day better. When I have a bad day and somebody says, hey, thank you, makes me feel a little bit better. And I appreciate thank yous. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Me? Rats. That's my word.
Perfect.
Rats.
Perfect. And I couldn't have said it any better. So that is a wrap.